What's up guys, welcome to the Chess Giant. This is Solomon Ordell, and in today's video we cover Game 6 of the 2021 World Chess Championship match held between Carlsen and Nepo, and this game will probably be remembered as one of the greatest ever as it lasted nearly 8 hours long and was 136 moves. We had a great effort from both sides, neither player making anything easy, and remember, up to this point in the match, we have seen 5 straight draws. Here we see Carlsen in Game 6 with the white pieces and Nepo with the black. Here Carlsen returns to his d4 prep, and we see Nepo continue in that f6. We see now knight f3, and following d5, the most popular option here for white is playing c4, but here we see the move g3. The reason g3 isn't as popular is because following c4, usually black can't play moves like bishop f5 or bishop g4 because of queen b3 ideas ganging up on that pawn on d5 and also directly attacking the pawn on b7. So by playing this move g3, Carlsen is offering Nepo that invitation. Do you want to play a move like bishop f5 or bishop g4? This often leads to very tense and hyper-dynamic games, but we see black just keep that bishop on c8 and play e6. Nepo's going, look, you can change your move order if you want and play a little move like g3. I'm just going to continue to play my normal chess. And now we just see natural developmental chess from both sides. Bishop g2, bishop e7, here both sides castle kingside. And now again from Carlsen, the most popular option, and it's not even close. If you look this up in a computer database, it's going to give you around 98% of the time white playing the move c4. The most popular option is c4 with over 10,000 occurrences, and the second most popular option is the move b3, which has officially, before this game, been played 128 times. Very rare move and has never been played before at Carlsen's level. I guess you could argue that no one's at his level, but you get what I'm saying. At the elite Grandmaster level, you just don't see this move. People don't really trust this idea. Usually they just go into c4 following this Catalan setup. But now here from black, we see the move c5, in which case Carlsen captures that pawn off the board. And after bishop takes c5, plays c4, using one of these flank pawns to attack the center pawn on d5. But now following d takes c4 from Nepo, we don't see Carlsen just take the pawn back, which most players would do. We see the move queen c2. Whole idea being this pawn can't move because it's pinned to the bishop. Black could take that pawn on b3, but they don't want to lose a minor piece, so we see Nepo continue with queen e7. But now again, a shocking move from Carlsen, knight b d2, offering black the opportunity to simply take the pawn on b3. I am not surprised that Nepo didn't go for this because of knight takes b3. As you guys can see here, I mean, we have a queen and a knight really ganging up on this bishop on c5. And here, if a move like bishop b6, we have a4 ideas in the air, looking to play a5, continuing to expand on the queen side, in addition to bishop a3, attacking the queen, and then saying thank you for the rook. We have a knight on f3, which is attacking the central squares. This bishop can become alive at an instant. We're going to put our rooks on d1 and c1, and white has great chances to win this game. So following this move of knight d2, we see Nepo just continue with the move knight c6, allowing Carlsen to play knight takes c4. But again, we see a shocking move now from Nepo with b5, attacking this knight. This seemed to surprise Carlsen, as he spent a ton of time trying to figure out what to do here, but he eventually decided on centralizing his knight to that e5 square, attacking the knight on c6. And here we see the best move from Nepo, that being knight b4, attacking the queen. But guys, black needs to be careful here of not taking this knight on e5. The whole idea being that we can take back with this knight. If this rook moves, because by the way, we are attacking that rook with our bishop, we're able to play knight c6, attacking both the queen and the rook, and we're simply going to go up the exchange. If we see a move like bishop b7, we simply take that bishop, removing the defender of that bishop on c5, and then we take that bishop and we're simply up a piece. And here, if the move knight d5, trying to hold this position together, we have knight c6. If black wants to hang on to their bishop, they're going to have to play the move queen d6, in which case we play e4, attacking this knight. If this knight moves, we have e5, attacking the queen, and then defending the knight on c6, because this knight will no longer be on that centralized square, and that's just going to be disastrous for black. I mean, we're also attacking the bishop on c5. Black is simply losing that game. So the best move here for black is queen takes c6, but even after this, we're simply going to take on d5. If this queen moves anywhere, we're going to take on e6, winning a pawn and attacking that rook on a8. And if black just takes the pawn back, we have bishop e3, and as y'all can see, black cannot move this bishop. Well, I mean, I guess they technically could if they want to lose their queen, but most players don't. So here we're simply going to take that bishop on c5, the very next move, and white is simply winning this. This is resignable, really at any level, but especially between players of the caliber of Carlsen and Nepo. So obviously, guys, that was kind of a long variation covering what happens if black takes on e5, but it was also a forceful variation. I mean, guys, in chess, if you ever see your opponent fianchetto their bishops, this bishop may seem innocent, but always be careful because it only takes one move. And all of a sudden, this bishop is the most active piece in the game. Here we see the move knight b4, whole idea being black just gets just enough time by attacking this queen to play the move bishop b7 so that this knight cannot move, giving us attacking counterplay on that rook on a8. So here we just see the move a3 from Carlsen, kicking this knight back to c6. And now the move knight d3. Carlsen would love to go up the bishop pair by taking this minor piece off the board. But Nepo goes, look, I like my bishops. I'm going to play bishop b7. By the way, guys, this is a very active bishop pair, pouncing all the way down to f2 and f3. And now we see Carlsen go with the very common Catalan idea of giving up this dark squared bishop for the knight on f6 by playing bishop g5 and then taking that minor piece. And here we see black not take back with the queen, which by the way would not have been a mistake, but instead keep the tension here by playing g takes f6. Here Nepo was probably hoping to maybe even push for the win with potential e5, e4 ideas supported by the strong bishop pair. This knight on c6, this very active rook on d8, and this rook on a8 is also going to be coming into the action with rook c8, very active file for that major piece. I actually like this decision from Nepo. And now we see Carlsen continue with rook ac1. This rook is much more active than it was on a3, so I like this move from Carlsen. And now from black, we see the move knight d4, centralizing this knight, attacking b3, f3, e2. And here we see Carlsen simplify this game a little bit by taking that knight off the board. And now after bishop takes d4, we have a big decision to make, and that's what to do with this queen. I mean, if we play a move like queen c2, it's vulnerable to attack. If we play a move like queen d2, it's literally in the way of the rook. And on top of that, guys, this queen is defending that pawn on a3. So here we see the move queen a2, giving that queen a safe square and holding onto that pawn. And now we see black simply take that bishop on g2 and then play the move queen b7 with check. Here white could have played the move f3, but it makes the dark squares extremely weak. So here Carlsen just plays the move king g1. And now we see Nepo continue with queen e4, centralizing this queen, really just trying to put some pressure on Carlsen in this position. And here from Carlsen, we see the move queen c2. Here black had an opportunity to play the move rook c8, which would have led to a very interesting game, allowing Carlsen to potentially take this rook off the board. However, following the move queen c2, black tries to slowly improve the positioning of their pieces before playing the move rook c8 by playing a5, expanding on the queen side of the board, and then the very next move, playing king g7. And here in this position, guys, if you were watching the game live, you probably saw a ton of elite Grandmaster players going, why is Carlsen even thinking in this position? Why is he spending time? Why not just play the move e3, which, by the way, is a solid choice. It gets rid of this bishop, and on top of that, it gives this queen an opportunity to kind of get out of the way of these rooks, give it a nice little square on e2, and also I-squares like g4, checking the king. I like this move from white. However, here from Carlsen, we see this shocking idea, rook d2, defending this pawn on e2. And now we see black continue with rook a8, in which case Carlsen takes that rook off the board. And after rook takes c8 and rook takes c8, we just gave up a queen, but we got 2 rooks in return with 6 pawns apiece. Here, black wastes no time in playing the move queen d5, trying to attack Carlsen's pawn structure, forcing this move of b4. By the way, if the move knight c1 is played, black is simply able to play the tactical idea of bishop takes f2 with check, and then simply winning our rook. They're going to continue with moves like queen b2, taking that pawn on a3, black simply crushing this. So we don't want to play a move like knight c1. So instead we see the move b4 from Carlsen, and now a4 from Nepo. And here we see the move e3 from Carlsen. Guys, this game was getting very intense. Carlsen was running out of time, and Nepo was trying to keep the pressure on Carlsen in this position. I think the best move was bishop b2, attacking this pawn on a3. This is not what Nepo played, however. After bishop b2, attacking this pawn, white's best option is playing rook c5, kicking this queen back to d6, in which case, guys, we cannot move this knight unless we want to lose our rook. So here, rook takes b2 is the best option. But now after queen takes d3, white does have the possibility of playing rook bc2. If black just wastes another move, we're actually going to play a move like rook c3, attacking the queen, defending the pawn on a3, and actually like white in that position from a practical standpoint. So here black really does need to take that pawn on a3, which does give up the pawn on b5, but now we have a very complex position, very hyperdynamic with the move queen d3, attacking both of these rooks. We're able to play a move like rook b to c5, and now black is able to throw this pawn down the board, and honestly, I do think that this was black's best chance to win, especially because Carlsen was in a ton of pressure when it came to the clock and trying to make his moves quick to reach that move 40 mark, in which case he would get more time. Here, even if white plays a move like h4, all of a sudden, white is simply losing because of this idea of a2. If rook b1, we play queen b1, and if the rook takes on a2, we're able to play queen b1 with check and then pick off that rook the very next turn. Black's winning this. So here, guys, I do think that bishop b2 was probably black's best option of trying to fight for the win, but it does still lead to a complicated game. Here we see the move bishop e5, and Carlsen now spent a ton of time thinking about this move and continued with a move h4. When he made this move, Carlsen had 3 minutes and 3 seconds on the clock. And guys, this is move 30 in the game. You only get more time when you hit move 40. So he has to make 10 more moves in the next 3 minutes. The pressure is on. And here we see Nepo actually play the move h5. I personally really don't like this move. I know oftentimes in chess, following the move h4, black will often play h5 to try to limit the activity of this pawn. But now this pawn on h5, as we're going to see in this game, is simply a weakness for us to pick off. Here Carlsen continues with king h2, which is one of the ideas of moving this pawn to h4 in addition to simply gaining space on the king side. And now we finally, after these moves of h5 and bishop e5, we finally see this bishop go back to b2. And now we see white play rook c5, but now this is much better for white, attacking the queen, attacking the pawn, and once this queen gets out of the way, attacking the pawn on h5, black's position is just holding on by a thread. We see the best move here from black with queen d6, and now the move rook d1 from Carlsen. By the way, here in this position, Carlsen only did have 2.5 minutes, so I can hardly blame him for missing this move. I never would have even thought of this. But guys, if you plug this into a computer program like Stockfish, it's going to tell you that rook c to c2 is winning for white. It gives white a much better game, attacking this bishop on b2. Whole idea being, if a move like bishop e5, we're able to play f4, kicking this bishop all the way down to a1, and we have knight c5 ideas. I mean, that's just crushing. The big question here is, why can't black just take the pawn on a3? Well, now we have knight f4 attacking both the queen and the pawn on h5. If a move like queen f8, we're able to play rook d7, putting our rook on the 7th rank, threatening knight takes e6 with check. And on top of that, we're going to bring our second rook to the 7th rank very quickly. And here, if the move queen takes b4 is played, black going, look, I mean, you just gave me 2 pawns. What are you getting out of this? We now have the move rook d7. Notice here, black can't really play any defensive chess because of knight takes e6. And if a move like queen e4, we're going to bring our second rook to c7. Notice here our pawn and our knight take away both g5 and h5. And once this rook takes on f7, we're going to be taking away the whole f-file. Black is in big, big trouble here. However, guys, Carlsen simply did not have enough time to find this move rook c to c2, and we see the move rook d1, in which case now it's black with the edge, with Nepo taking that pawn on a3, and now we see white play rook takes b5, and following queen d7, attacking this rook, we see that rook go right back to c5, and here, guys, honestly, black could have just took this pawn on b4, right? Attacking the rook, whole idea being if this knight moves, we simply win that rook on d1 as the black pieces. However, here we see the move e5. I think here Nepo saw that Carlsen was in a huge time crunch. He had to make another 5 moves in the next minute and a half or so, and here he's actually wanting to play the move e4 potentially, attacking this knight. But now we just see Carlsen bring this rook back. And again, I do think that e4 was a good option, making this knight go back to b2, in which case I think that black has a good game. But even more than that, why not just take this pawn on b4? I mean, when I was watching this game, I was very confused on why black didn't just win the pawn. I think that he was really trying to complicate the position because Carlsen was in such time trouble. But honestly, guys, I really don't think that this is a good strategy. If you see the best move, you might as well play it. Instead, we see the move queen d5, which allows Carlsen to play rook d to d2, and then the very next move, rook a2, just hanging on in this position by a thread. Here black continued with the move of e4, attacking our knight on d3. Notice here, if black takes on b4, I actually don't really like this plan for black because we're simply able to capture back. And now after queen takes b4, we're able to play rook d3, rook a3, and then win the pawn on a4, all the while defending that pawn on f2. And guys, once we do win this pawn on a4, I know I'm showing a lot of arrows, but following rook d3, rook a3, and winning this pawn, eventually, if we get the chance, we could even double up on the 7th rank by putting these rooks on one of these squares, taking the pawn on f7, giving up 2 rooks for a pawn and a queen. And the whole idea there is that we get one of the pawns, we get the opponent's queen, and all of a sudden we're going to have 4 pawns against 3. I think that white is the one in the driver's seat here. So Nepo was smart not to play the move of bishop takes b4. Even then, I think that black should have played a move like queen c3 or even f5. But here we see the move e4 attacking the knight, and that allows Carlsen to play knight c5. And now Carlsen is simply able to capture the pawn on e4. Whole idea being that black can take that knight, but now we're going to win the bishop. And now it's even worse than the variation that I showed you guys earlier, in that it's already 4 pawns to 4 pawns. Following capturing this bishop, we're able to play rook a2, take this pawn, then even play a move like rook f4, defending f2 and h4, bring this rook to a square like a6, take f6. I mean, white is simply crushing that game. So here we see black hold on to the bishop by playing the move queen b3. And finally, guys, it's move 40. The storm has passed. Both players have officially reached that 40 move mark and got additional time, more time to think. They have to make another 20 moves to get even more time. But both players had a chance to walk away from the table, get some snacks, and take a deep breath. Carlsen survived this position and now continues with the move of rook ac2. And following bishop f8, there's nothing that we can do from stopping this pawn from going to a3, but we can stop it from going to a2 by keeping our rooks on the 2nd rank, really holding our game together. And now we see the move knight c5. Again, tempting black to take this knight, but we see the better option of keeping these pieces on the board and playing the move queen b5, in which case Carlsen goes right back to the square of d3. And following a3, we now see knight f4. Very nice central outpost for that knight, attacking the pawn on h5. And here following the move queen a5, we see rook a2, not giving this pawn a chance to even think about advancing up the board anymore. And now we see the move bishop b4, kicking this rook to d3. And now the move king h6. Here we see the move rook d1, and white playing the move rook da1, really putting some pressure on that pawn on a3, making both of these pieces hang on to this pawn as long as they possibly can. We see the move bishop d6, and now king g1 from Carlsen. Both players here going back and forth a little bit. We see queen b3, and now Carlsen reroute his knight by playing knight e2 and then knight d4. Very nice centralized square, attacking that square of f5. Black needs to be careful here of not playing a move like queen c4, because they would simply lose their bishop following knight f5, checking the king, and then winning that minor piece. So here we see the move king h7, getting that knight f5 check threat out of the way. And now Carlsen just goes back to h2. Honestly, in this position, black probably could have just played king h6, king h7, and just gone back and forth and probably held on to a draw unless I'm missing something. I don't really see a way for either of these rooks to be active in the game, because right now both the queen and the bishop are defending that pawn on a3. And on top of that, if white plays a move like knight f3 and knight e1, black is able to play queen e4, looking to play queen takes h4. Notice right now, if this queen could somehow move and take the pawn on h4, this pawn on g3 could not capture the queen because it's pinned by the bishop on d6. So honestly, black could have just kind of went back and forth, but we see the move queen e4, which gives Carlsen the opportunity to take on a3. And now if black takes our rook, we're simply able to take that minor piece back, and we're going to have a rook, knight, and pawn all for a queen. A very strong setup. Really no way for this black queen to make anything happen in terms of checking our king, and white's going to have good chances there. So here we see the move queen takes h4, checking the king. Again, this pawn cannot move because it's pinned by the bishop on d6. But now we see the move king g1. Black needs to be careful now of not just going, oh, well, they can't take my queen. I'll just take the rook, because now we can take the queen, right? Our king's no longer on h2. So we see the move queen e4, followed by rook a4 from Carlsen. And now the move bishop e5, attacking this knight. And now we see this move, knight e2, attacking this queen. And following queen c2, we see this rook lift up to a2, attacking the queen, defending the knight. And following queen b3, king g2, queen d5 check, and finally the move f3. Carlsen starting to advance these pawns up the board very slowly, but very surely. And now we see the move queen d1, and Carlsen continue by playing the move f4, attacking this bishop. Carlsen is trying to win this game and trying to get one of these pawns eventually to one of these final back rank squares. We see the move bishop c7 from black, and now king f2. Carlsen is in no rush. He's simply trying to give himself a solid position. We see the move bishop b6, and now rook a1 attacking the queen. And here black only has so many options. So we see the move queen b3 attacking that pawn on the e file, in which case Carlsen plays rook e4, centralizing this rook, defending the pawn on e3, in which case black continues by king g7. We now see rook e8. And now after f5, rook a to a8. Carlsen is trying to make both of his rooks as active as possible, and he was potentially thinking about getting this king into a mating net, but because of f5, this king now has room to escape. So we see the move queen b4, and here white continues with rook a c8. Usually when I say the move rook a c8 on these videos, it's talking about the black rooks, not the white, but anyways, besides the point, we see black continue with bishop a5, wanting to play a move like queen e1 check, but Carlsen's not going to allow this. He plays the move rook c1, and following bishop b6, we see rook e5 attacking this very weak pawn on f5. Guys, black's pawn structure is absolutely terrible. They have an isolated pawn and double isolated pawns, all of which are on light squares and cannot be defended by this bishop on b6. So here we see the move queen b3, whole idea being that black actually wants white to take on f5, because they would win back this pawn on e3. But now we see Carlsen bring that rook back to e8, and following queen d5, playing rook c to c8 yet again. We're kind of going in circles a little bit here, but again, guys, white is in no rush. There's really nothing that black can do in a position like this. Why not just kind of move the pieces around and find the right time to strike? Here, black continues with queen h1, Nepo bringing this queen here, trying to somehow create some disruption, but now we just see the move rook c1. Whole idea being, look, I mean, you could check my king if you want. If you do this, I'm probably just going to bring that king up to f3, and all of a sudden your queen is low-key kind of trapped. I mean, I guess after king f3, you could play a move like queen h3, but even then, I mean, we could play rook b8, attacking the bishop. If queen g4 check, we bring the king back to g2. I mean, this queen just isn't doing much here. You know what I mean? I mean, queen h2 check, forcing that king to f3, then spending two moves, queen h3, queen g4, then bringing it back to h3. I mean, or even g6. I mean, this queen's just not doing a ton. So we see the move queen d5. Black's centralizing this queen, and now the move rook b1, attacking the bishop on b6, and following bishop a7, the move rook e7. And now we see black continue with bishop c5, in which case Carlsen plays rook e5, attacking the queen, attacking the bishop once this queen gets out of the way, and attacking the pawn on f5. Very active rook here. And now we see the move queen d3, black making threats of their own. First off, defending the pawn on f5, but more importantly, attacking this rook on b1. So here we see the move rook b7, getting this rook to the 7th rank, and following queen c2, we see Carlsen continue with rook b5, attacking this bishop, making it go out of the way. And the very next move, playing rook a5, attacking the bishop yet again, and then playing rook a b5, yet again, attacking the bishop. This bishop's just trying to find a safe home, and Carlsen's not letting it happen. We see the move now of bishop a7, and here we finally see Carlsen capture on f5, which he could have done for quite a long time now, but now we have our rook in an optimal position, and this bishop cannot even move without getting captured. Notice how Carlsen's in no rush here. He is trying to get the best position he possibly can before taking a simple pawn. Here we see the move queen d3, attacking this pawn on e3, and now the move from Carlsen, which was very hard to find but very strong. Rook takes f7, giving up a rook. Yes, we just gave up a rook for one pawn, but in return, we get a bishop. And even then, this is a very hard move to find, because if you look at the point system in chess, we just gave up a rook and we only got a bishop and pawn in return. So we gave up 5 points and we only got 4. But notice in this position, guys, these pawns cancel each other out. But notice here we have a rook and knight for our queen, and on top of that, 2 pawns. So we have a rook, knight, and 2 pawns against a queen, and really, white is the one fighting for the win now. We see the move queen d5, and now white continuing with rook a6 check, Following the move king h7, we see rook a1, rook king g6, knight d4, and here black continues with queen b7, wanting to play queen b2 with check, winning that rook. Carlsen's going, I don't want to give you my rook. I'm going to play the move rook a2, and following queen h1, trying to play queen h2 check, skewering the king, and winning the rook yet again. Nepo is making it clear he wants the rook, but Carlsen yet again is not going to give it to him. He plays the move rook a6 with check, and then the very next move, knight f3. I really like this move from white, stopping black from really playing any kind of check and also attacking the key squares of e5 and g5, which would be attacking the opponent's king. Now we see the move queen b1. Notice here black really doesn't have anything they can do. I mean, they can kind of move their king around and they can kind of throw their queen around, but they can't do much in this position with just a queen. This queen's kind of flying all over the place, trying to find something to do. And now we see the solid move from Carlsen, rook d6, and following king g7, rook d5. Why not just attack that pawn? And here Nepo checks the king with queen a2, but on top of that, attacks the rook on d5. So we see this rook drop back to d2, in which case we see queen b1, rook e2, and now queen b6, not allowing this pawn to move. Carlsen would love to start pushing this pawn up the board. Black is trying to stop this as much as they can. Now we see the move rook c2. Whole idea being once this rook is attacked, we have knight d4. Notice here in this position, guys, how every single piece of white's is defended. All the pawns are defended. This king defends e3 and g3. f4 is defended by two pawns. This knight is defended by a pawn, and the rook is defended by a knight. We don't usually need to defend a king in that sense, but this king is very safe with all of this protection around it. We see the move queen h1. Again, black just trying to create something in this position, just throwing this queen around. But now we see the move rook c7 check, and following king f6, rook c6 check, king f7. We see the move knight f3, and now queen b1. Again, guys, we're kind of going in circles here. We see knight g5 with check, forcing that king over, knight e6 check, and then bringing that knight back to d4. In which case, yet again, we see the move queen h1, guys. We have officially reached move 100 in this game, and many were wondering, I mean, how on earth is Carlsen going to win this? It seems like we're just kind of going back in circles. This queen has literally played queen h1 about 5 times now, but now we see the move rook c7 check, and following king f6, knight f3, and following queen b1. Everyone was starting to wonder, okay, is Carlsen just going to play rook c6 check and then knight d4 again, followed by, a move like queen h1? Are we just kind of going to go back and forth? But now we see Carlsen switch things up with rook d7, preparing for a check with rook d2, and then the very next move, we see knight g1. What on earth is Carlsen doing? Well, he's trying to bring his knight to e2, and as you guys are going to see, he has a very nice idea behind this. Again, black can't really do much. The only thing they can do is move their king around, move this queen around as if it's going to do something, or even play a move like h4, which simply loses a pawn. So now we just see another move like queen b4, Nepo trying to do something in this position, but now we just see rook d1, and following queen b3, we have rook d6 with check, and now rook d4. Whole idea being once this queen checks, now we can play knight e2 check, and the very next move, because it's a knight here now, black cannot stop this e4 idea. They can't play a move like queen b6 and stop us from advancing the pawn, and they also can't play a move like queen b1 or queen h1, stopping this move because it is defended. So Carlsen got this set up on purpose just so that he could get that single square with the pawn. We see the move queen b1, and finally, we see Carlsen play e4, slowly marching this pawn up the board, trying to find itself a home. We see the move queen h1 for black, and now rook d7 with check, and following king g8, we have rook d4, and here we see Nepo play queen h2 check, followed by h4. Nepo is trying to break this thing open, trying to get rid of the defense for this king so that this queen could eventually just check this king around and call it a perpetual check, or really just check until Carlsen just gives up the fact that he can even win. So we see the move h4, black trying to break this game open, white captures that pawn, and now we see the move queen h3, in which case we have king d2, and now the move queen takes h4. So guys, in a serious match like this, I do think that most players would probably try to keep playing with the white pieces here. I mean, yes, if it was just a rook and a king versus a king and a queen, black would win, but we also have a knight. So if we lose both of these pawns, we're able to hold on to the draw. But guys, on top of that, we do have these two pawns. Why not try to push them up the board? However, I do think that Carlsen gives us a valuable lesson here, and that's not to be in a rush. As you guys are going to see, he keeps his positioning very tight and very closed. The bros stick together the entire way through. He doesn't just start marching his pawns up the board, playing a rush to move like e5 and e6, overextending his position and allowing black to play checks and picking off pawns. And guys, just a quick little personal story. I remember one time I was playing against Susan Polgar and one of her sisters, and in a simul, not in an actual tournament game or anything, but in a simul, I was playing against Grandmaster Susan Polgar, and it was in the endgame, and there was nothing on the board except the fact that I had a knight and 3 pawns against a king and a rook. Okay, so I had a knight and 3 pawns, and she had a rook. Guys, I just started throwing my pawns down the board. I got really nervous. I just started throwing my pawns down the board super quick. Guys, I should have kept my pieces together, and that's exactly what we're going to see Carlsen do. I ended up drawing that game, but as you guys are going to see, Carlsen keeps his position as compact as he possibly can. We see the move rook d3, and following king f8, we see rook f3, the move king e3. Again, black really can't do anything at all now except move this king and kind of just fly this queen around the board. We see the move queen a5, and here Carlsen's going, look, you want to bring your queen to the queen side of the board? Okay, I'll bring my king to this side of the board, play the move king f2, and after the move queen a7, we see rook e3. And following queen d7, so many players, including myself, would be so tempted just to play the move e5 and e6. I mean, why not just start marching these pawns on the board? But guys, Carlsen is not in a rush. He is trying to bring his pieces, not just his pawns, but his pieces as far as he possibly can before moving these pawns. We see the move knight g3, and following queen d2 with check, we see king f3, and following queen d1, we see the move rook e2. Black continues with queen b3 check, and again, why not play king g4? Why not try to throw your king out there a little bit? A lot of players will want to do this, but here we just see Carlsen continue with king g2. There is literally no rush in this position, and on top of that, they've been playing for about over 7 hours by this point, so why not just keep going? We see the move king g2, and following the move queen b7, the move rook d2. By playing queen b7, black is trying to stop this pawn from marching any further, so we see the move rook d2, followed by rook d5, and following king e7, we see rook e5 with check, and after king f7, rook f5 check, and finally, after king e8, another pawn move with e5. Carlsen finally decides, okay, it's finally okay for me to push up my pawn to e5. Here we see black continue with queen a2 check, and now we see king h3, and following queen e6, king h4. Carlsen is wasting no time now. He has a very solid setup, every piece defending the other. Why not get this king involved? We see queen h6 with check, and now knight h5. And here again, we see Nepo with just really no choice but to just keep moving this queen around, in which case Carlsen finds the very nice move e6. Whole idea being, yeah, you can win the rook, but then I'm able to play knight g7 with check, attacking the king and simply picking this queen off the board. So we see the move queen g6, and now an even more impressive move than that of e6, rook f7. Absolutely amazing idea. The big question here is, why doesn't queen takes e6 work? I mean, doesn't it seem as if after knight g7 check, black is able to win the rook and then the knight, in which case they're only a pawn down? Well, yes, here in this position, white is only a pawn up, but Carlsen knows his chess, as we are all aware of, and here following the move king g5, white is simply winning. Now, if it's black's turn, they're able to gain opposition. What I mean by this is that they're able to play king f5, attacking our pawn, and then after king g3, black is the one who can just keep their king on f5, continue to go back to f6. If our king goes to g4, play king g6. If our king goes to e4, play king e6, keep staying in front of our king, and we're not going to be able to promote that pawn. However, it's white's move here. We're able to play king g5, and after a move like king f7, play king f5, and now we're the one with opposition. Whole idea being we're the one in control. If black wants to go that way, we're going to go this way. If black wants to go that way, we're going to go this way. It's kind of like playing basketball and crossing somebody up. Black has to give up one of these key squares. If a move like king g7, again, we're going to go the other way. And after the move king f8, we're able to start marching our pawn down the board. f6, f7, the king's going to have to give up the square of e7 by playing king g7, in which case we play king e7, and Carlsen has the idea of simply using one single pawn to win this game. So again, guys, if queen takes e6, we're able to play knight g7 with check, take the queen off the board, and black is able to get a rook, knight, and pawn, but then we're able to play king g5 once this king is on e6, gain opposition, and white simply winning. So here we see the move king d8 from black, and now we see Carlsen continue with f5. Again, guys, Carlsen is keeping his pieces together. Every single piece here is defended. And following the move queen g1, we see the beautiful idea, knight g7. I mean, just a classy move here. Whole idea being that we're wanting to play e7 followed by e8. Notice how this knight also supports the square of e8, and there's simply no way for black to stop this. Black here could try to play checks, but they're simply going to lose. Here we see Nepo resign the game. Just to give you guys a quick example, if black does check with a move like queen f2, we're able to run this king all the way up to that safe square of g8. For example, king h5, black checks, we're simply going to keep marching up the board, play a move like king g8, and now we're able to play e7, e8 equals queen, and this game is simply over. Well, wow, guys, that was a long game. I honestly never thought that I would review a game on this channel that was 136 moves long. I can't even remember the last time I saw a game that long, honestly. I mean, the only way you really see those is by looking them up. But gosh, guys, great game from both sides. Honestly, Nepo played really well. He put up a great fight. If you're making Carlsen sit down for almost 8 straight hours and play a game of chess, you're probably pretty good. And Carlsen obviously played fantastic chess, finding some amazing ideas and converting a very hard endgame against one of the best players in the world. Let me know down in the comment section below what you thought of this game, and let me know what you think of the match thus far. Thanks for watching today's video. If you'd like to see our top 5 chess players of all time, which by the way, I have Carlsen at number 1, click the video to the left. If you'd like to see our top 4 Ponziani traps, click the video to the right. Very dangerous opening. If you haven't heard about it, leave a comment down below to let me know what other videos you'd like to see covered on this channel. And as always, I appreciate you guys. Thanks for watching. Peace.